Good morning and welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. This is the first day of our last weekend of broadcasts of the author of the hour. And I'd like to thank ReadersMagnet for this unique virtual book fair, which showcases the authors and not the publisher. We have had just a remarkable week and a half, and I'm hoping that we have the next 3 days with our author of the hour are just as remarkable. I invite you to visit the 150 author booths that are part of the platform, and just enjoy it. Please enjoy it. And again, thank you to ReadersMagnet. Before we get to our panelist and our author, I would like to do a little housekeeping here. If you have some questions for our author, please send them to the chat line, and the production staff will send them out to me, and we will ask our esteemed author. And please mute your computers so that we just have a great time here. My name is Eleanor Gassetta, and I'm your moderator for this session. I am the author of 2 books. I'm the author of One Caregiver's Journey, which is a book about my 9.5 years of caregiving for my mother, who fell and broke her hip at the age of 93 and passed away in my home at the age of 102. It's an easy read, and it's a snapshot into the realities, challenges, and changes of caregiving. My second book, which was just recently published by ReadersMagnet, is Generations of Good Food, which is a compilation of 200 recipes of my Italian family. Our panelist today is Dorothea Gibbons. Gordon. My apologies. She is a retired high school teacher of foreign languages, and she's the author of the inspirational memoir, When Life Has Other Plans, Discover the Hidden Gifts. She was born and educated in Bavaria, Germany, immigrated to Canada with her Canadian husband in the 1970s. Besides school teaching and raising 2 children, she has followed her curiosity and acquired a number of other useful skills. Dorothea holds a certificate as a graphoanalyst from the Graphoanalysis Institute of Chicago and worked in question documents examiner and an expert witness in the British Columbia Provincial and Supreme Courts in Victoria, Canada in the 1980s. I'm sorry, that's an awful lot to get out. Okay. As a dream builder coach, she inspires her clients to follow examples and pursue their visions and goals. And she combines soul work with alternative healing modalities as a certified auricular laser technician and energy medicine practitioner. She's now retired, and she has dream building courses via Zoom for mature students in the elder colleges in her area. She enjoys her role as a motivational, inspirational educator because it gives her a sense to empower others with her hard-earned wisdom. Dorothea, would you like to take a couple of minutes to give us a little background, and then we'll go on to our author of the hour?
Okay, thank you very much, Shelby. Yes, I'm coming from Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada, and it's still rather early in the day. And I would like to thank ReadersMagnet for taking me on as a panelist. And I was actually the very last panelist that they took on. There's a bit of a story behind that, because I had asked the universe to give me an opportunity to present my book on a larger scale than just through Facebook. And a few weeks ago, I received a mail or had an email in my inbox that talked about storytelling. And I thought, oh, here's something that I like to do. I'll phone They told me that all the slots for the authors were taken, but they needed one more panelist. And I thought, yes, that's the answer from the universe that I have expected, again, in the most unusual ways. So I'm really happy to be here surrounded by such great ladies. So, as you said, I've written a book called When Life Has Other Plans, Discover the Hidden Gifts. And it's my true story as a woman whose life force had other plans than I had for myself. And I describe in it how I left my native Bavaria, studied in Boulder, Colorado to improve my English.
Where I am.
Yeah. Oh, you're in Boulder.
I'm west of Denver, but I'm in Colorado.
Yes. Oh, great. And then I studied in Boulder, and then went to Mexico to improve my Spanish, and then met some Canadian fellows, of course, and then ended up in Canada. And that's where I was introduced to my spiritual gifts, and went through a lot of lessons. Life gave me lessons, like a special needs child, a failed marriage, cancer, stroke, accidents, which forced an immense cycle of growth and made me aware of the spiritual gifts of healing that I had.
Oh, great. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce now our author of the hour, Joanne White. Dr. Joanne White is an international #1 best-selling, award-winning author, speaker, and consultant. She's recognized as a Goodwill Global Ambassador for civil and humanitarian work in education, entrepreneurship, coaching, and women's issues. She was also named in 2015 as the worldwide branding top female executive in professional coaching by Who's Who. As a certified life and leadership spiritual business coach and energy master teacher, she empowers and inspires men, women, families, and businesses to achieve greater health and wellness, master success, thrive, and triumph. Early in her career, she taught children with special needs for several years and then became an adjunct instructor at Temple University in the special education department. Soon after, Dr. White was hired as the executive director of a comprehensive educational, clinical, vocational, autistic, residential, and community program for children and youth with special needs in Bancroft, New Jersey. She later served as the director of research, evaluation, and training for all Bancroft programs. Globally known as the Success Doc, White gets to the heart of what matters most in businesses and people, using success principles to enrich the lives and businesses of her clients. And in addition to all of these wonderful accolades, Joanne's really a lot of fun.
Thank you, Ellie, for that introduction. Oh my God.
Well,
and Dorothy, I just want to tell you one thing, that oftentimes when you and I were talking, actually the three of us were talking earlier, oftentimes the universe, God, like taps us on the shoulder, whatever, and guides us into what we're here to do, even if it comes through a stroke, an accident, whatever it is, and we have to follow, and we do. We really do.
Joanne, tell us about the book you call Your Baby. Tell us about More Heaven, because every child is special.
It is my baby.
It is your baby.
And this book, by the way, was very guided. I had no intention of writing it, and I was a special. Well, one of the books fell. I was a special education teacher, but many children, over 1 million children in the United States with special needs and autism, were not allowed in public school. Either they were kicked out or they had very limited education, because the schools were able to say at that time, well, we don't know what to do. We can't educate them. And so many of these children were isolated. If their families didn't have money, they weren't able to get an education. And finally, a law came about that said, hey, school districts, PL 94-142, if we're giving you money to run educational programs, you're going to have to figure out a way to educate some of these children a lot more than what you're doing now. And I was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at the time, and I was teaching and special needs. And I was offered the opportunity to open this program for many of the children who were not allowed in school before. They sent the first little girl in a taxi who was autistic because they were afraid to put her on the school bus. They didn't know what would happen. And eventually she did go on the school bus, but it took time for them to understand that, hey, she's not going to do any harm. Most of the harm was done to these children. And this particular child, her name was Tracy, not in the book, but this particular child was actually beaten up because of her differences, attacked because of her differences.
So you say More Heaven is based on a true story of an inspirational journey, and yet you also maintain that it's somewhat fictional. Is that because you wanted to protect the identity of the true characters?
In part, yes. And also because within the book, there's a true, I mean, a lot of what happens in the book follows the true course of what happened in the classroom. And yet what I needed to do, because what was to really get inside these kids' heads. So there are stories within the story. Each child's progress not only takes place externally, but also takes place within their inner minds. And I thought, well, who am I to presume that I know what's going on in anybody's head, like in yours, Eleanor, or yours, Dorothea, or anybody else, or these kids. So that's why I made it fiction.
Okay, Dorothea, you have a question?
Yes, I'm wondering, you said that the book was inspired, divinely maybe inspired. And what were the clues that you picked up that you should write that book?
So I was teaching at the time, and every day I would wake up and there would be a few lines and I'd think, okay, this is weird. And finally I said like this, okay, I know what you want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. And I created the first draft many, many years ago. And an interesting piece to that is when I initially tried to publish it, and it was ahead of its time, I was told by many mainstream publishers, we don't publish books we won't publish a book whose main characters are children with special needs and disabilities.
Incredible.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I put it away. I grew up a little bit and did other things in my career, but I was guided with this book. And when you're guided, as you both know, you know something's going to happen, whatever it is. So when the time was right, I kind of brought it out again, and here we are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So what? So you talk about plunging into the hearts and minds of children with autism and special needs, daring us not to love, understand, or to root for them while feeling their pain, and exclusion and celebrating their originality, individual uniqueness, and brilliance. Talk to us about, you and I have talked about this before. Talk to our audience about just what brilliant minds. All of these children are not destined to do rote activities that employees don't like. They are destined to go into the mainstream and to do just unbelievably technical tasks.
You know, you're so right. We actually underestimate the potentiality of many of these children. For example, that first little girl that's in the book, she initially wasn't able to write And basically the way she talked was she kept parroting everything I said, and she didn't pay attention to communication or eye contact or anything like that. And as she became more comfortable, and as I say, as I got into her world, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, she was able to come into our world, into my world of learning and education and communication, and she blossomed. She started to write. She became one of the most incredible little scholars. She loved words. She loved, but it was, and initially she presumably had the mental age of a child of 3,
Wow.
but she was way beyond her years. And yet, because she wasn't able to be tested or educated, people didn't know of her abilities. And there was one little boy in the class who was very angry, and, and but he was brilliant too. So it's like we we have to give people, and you and I've talked about this, like you said, we have to give people of all differences a chance. Why assume or presume that we know what's going on within a person, within a person's mind, just because they can't take a test, or just because they speak differently, or just because they do something that's different, or a little bit bizarre or strange. When we actually accept these people, accept these children for who they are, what happens is that all this incredible beauty and individuality comes bursting forth in such a wonderful way. There was one boy who actually had he brought in a lot of imaginary characters. He had a memory that was so long. He was able to recite things verbatim. He could tell you how to get from just by going to a drive with his parents once. He could tell you how to get from one street to another. And again, we underestimate their ability, and I think it's an injustice that we do, and I think it's something that we need to pay attention to. And it's not just with these kids. It happens with anybody that has differences. We decide that they're less than in some way, or they need to be not accepted and not treated equally. Well, that's something that we still need to change in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Dorothea?
Yeah, that reminds me of a story I once read about an animal school where they had all these animals and they were all supposed to climb a tree. So, the duck failed miserably, and so did other animals, because they were different. They had different skills, and you apparently knew how to access these kids, which brings me to the question: what techniques did you use to reach these children?
Well, it's interesting, and back to those animals. Yeah, if we decide, hey, a fox isn't going to be able to do what a squirrel does, and that's okay. We're in good shape. So I had a lot of training in graduate school and in college, and yet when I met these kids, it's almost like I had to put the book away and figure out something else. So I was very interested. I have a background in dance and music and in play therapy. And well, they didn't call it play therapy at the time, but in playing. And so I brought these skills into the class. That first little girl, she would be moving around the room. And one of the ways that I finally got to make eye contact and to get her to communicate with me was to move with her and kind of mimic it. And it became a dance. And she, again, to me, it was like accepting who she was, accepting that somebody would say, gee, she's weird. And well, how could she? But it was like, wow, look at that. She's so engaged. That was probably her way of dealing with stress and dealing with other kinds of things. And when I was able to utilize movement and dance with her, she connected with me.
So, Joanne, I have I have a great niece who is a music major at Colorado State University. She is majoring in music therapy for autistic children. So, how has that differed from the educational and cultural climate of the time when you started today? And she thoroughly loves it. She will graduate next year, and she's doing internships now, and she just says it's so gratifying.
Well, tell her to contact me because I'm working on a docuseries. But well, that's for a whole other thing. But truly, yes, Ellie. Well, it's important because I used music too. And at the time, now music therapy, dance therapy, play therapy are all techniques that people are using to work with children with special needs. But at the time, that was not necessarily accepted, but I closed my door. And we did what we needed to do. We did music, we did dance, we did play. We, you know, what again, whatever it was. My belief was that if I get into these children's whatever they're doing, even the boy that brought in all these imaginary characters, if I get into their worlds, they'll be able to feel comfortable enough to take a chance with my world, with our world of learning and education, and and it worked. But I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was intuitively guided. It wasn't like I learned it. It was like, okay, what do I do with this little girl? But she's moving. Well, if I move, will it make a difference? And will she connect with me? And that was the first time she gave me eye contact, was when I started to move with her. And that was the first time she started to say, to introduce her own speech rather than just parroting what I said, and it was it was such a wonderful blessing. It was so heartwarming. You know, I say that these children learned from me, but I learned so much too. I learned how to laugh from one of the little boys in there, laugh at myself because he just brought in so much brilliance and fun. And I learned about, hey, you know, we have to think outside of the box sometimes. Yes, education is great, but sometimes you need other tools and other resources to reach people and to make it effective. And that's what I did.
We're getting some questions from the audience, ladies.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. Kathy wants to know why you named your book More Heaven.
Okay. Well, one of the little boys in the book, his name is Martin. He brought in all these imaginary characters, and one of them was King Zagut, who lived on another planet, planet Zagut. And and King Zagut's edict was that everything needed to happen in order, and that on the planet they needed to create more heaven than hell.
And then the audience also wants to know, where do you get the energy for all that you have done?
That's a good question.
Who knows, right?
I'm not sure. I'm very guided. I wake up inspired. I wake up guided. And we were talking earlier, I've had a lot of injuries and things happen. And somehow that I get motivated through what I'm here to do. And I think part of what I'm here to do and what we're all here to do is be able to share our own gifts and help other people access theirs and be here to serve. And you know, somebody said, Joanne, when are you retiring? I said, what? Why? I mean, hopefully I can write the last book and maybe somebody might have to finish it, but why? Doesn't make any sense. I hope I answered the question.
And someone else said they love your soothing voice and you should do your own audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do meditation, and I have a free meditation on YouTube. And some people say that I put them to sleep, but
Hopefully it's not from boredom.
my soothing voice.
Dorothea, do you have a question?
Thank you.
Yes, I was just going to comment on the fact that we teachers have to think outside of the box in order to get our message across. And then when I was teaching foreign languages, some kids had a hard time. So I taught them songs in the language because it goes into a different part of the brain. And later on, they told me they still sing those songs that they learned then. But to get back to the work with the children that you did, can you identify some myths that were perpetuated about children with autism and special needs?
Well, one is that they couldn't learn, that they just would never be able to communicate the way we do, that oftentimes many of these children's parents were told, well, you may really need to put your kid in an institution because there's no hope. These kids aren't going to be able to work. They're not going to be able to have any kind of so-called normal. I don't know what that word means anyway, but that's besides the point. Life, and that they're always going to be at the mercy of parents and others. And it's so not true. And I just have a quick story about someone that I connected with who's an autistic savant. She's an adult, and she's going to be in my docuseries. And she has a background in art and in science, and she's brilliant. And again, we underestimate these children and these adults, and it's a shame, because if parents believed that at the time, and parents were really the forerunners in terms of helping to change legislation, helping to change the views, even in the school. I mean, there were many teachers and parents of children of so-called children who were normal, who were very afraid of this program. They thought, well, it's going to make, what's going to happen to my kids? What's going to happen? It's going to make the education less relevant. What's going to happen? Are these kids going to be violent? Are they going to hurt my children? And really the reverse was true, because two of these children in my class at the time experienced attacks from some of the children who were in the so-called regular classes because of intolerance. And we see intolerance today. It may not necessarily be just about special needs, but it has to stop. Again, we see people as different. And when we see people as different, we think that they don't feel, they don't have the same understanding, they don't have love, and all of that. They can't think, they can't learn, and it's so untrue.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm on a bandstand here.
That's not a problem. It's your hour. You can be on the bandstand, Joanne. The whole notion of diversity, and whether it's in kids, adults, the whole notion of diversity is quite interesting. And problems with diversity is that we don't quite know how to support each other. What kind of supports were given to the programs you worked in, to the teachers, and especially to the kids?
You hear my silence?
I do. I do. Are you getting up and dance?
That was intentional, and because I talk a lot. Initially, there weren't any. I mean, I didn't even have an aide at the time, and if I had to go to the bathroom, I just couldn't even do that. Especially with that first little girl, she came in, and eventually, the second year, we opened up 2 more classes, and then I had an aide. And then we had a speech and language therapist, but it was almost as if the program had to prove itself, and people had to calm down and say, well, okay, they're not going to harm my kids. They're not going to harm education or the school. And we need to be able to bring in more services to support these kids and to support the program.
Dorothea, are those this kind of the same things you've experienced in Canada?
I'm not sure. I'm not aware of it. I know that my son, who was special needs, was put in regular school classes and had extra support from physiotherapists, and that that was in the mid 80s. He was already more integrated, more easily, and there wasn't any rejection, if anything. at that time it was inclusivity that was emphasized.
Now that happened later here.
Yeah.
And many children with special needs were then allowed in regular classes with supports, with, like you said, with for your son, with maybe with an aide, or given more time to take a test, or additional supports that were necessary. But this program, it was like, okay, sink or swim, pass or fail, because again, many of these kids were not allowed in school. There was one little girl who actually didn't finish the program, but she was initially put in a class for the deaf. And she wasn't deaf, but they didn't know what to do with her because she wasn't communicating, so they assumed she couldn't hear, which is sad, really sad.
Right. Yeah. Well, I wasn't around in the 70s to know what happened in Canada because I didn't immigrate until the end of the 70s. So you have done a lot of pioneer work there.
Well, I worked a lot with parents, and we worked a lot with the educational system to help to change minds and hearts to be able to accept these children and embrace their differences. Like, Ellie, you were talking about diversity. It's when we're able to embrace diversity and to recognize that we all have more similarities than differences, and really to celebrate our differences. And I do a lot of work with that because I think it's so important. I mean, that creates beautiful cultures and beautiful music and beautiful art and everything, because we're bringing all our differences together to support one another and to create more beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
How has the climate for children and families with special needs changed today from when you started?
Well, today, like we've been talking, there's more acceptance, even at college. There's a child that I know who's going to college, and he's getting the supports that he needs to get extra help if that's necessary. And as Dorothea said, many children are now mainstream, so they're in regular education classes if it's feasible, and getting special supports. And also parents are very much involved in the educational program with IEPs and have a voice, which is important. And also children have a voice. So I think it's changed, but I still see some problems. Oftentimes I'll go into school to advocate for a family with special needs because for some reason they're not being heard and people are overlooking certain kinds of things. So I think a lot of progress has made, and I still think there's more that needs to be done.
Wow. Dorothea?
Well, that answers my question about what still needs to be done. It seems that you're on the forefront. Do you also engage with other teachers, other educators who are in that field?
Not so much lately because I'm doing a lot of other stuff, but I have. And yes, and I work, I actually do some teaching
Mm-hmm.
with people in special education and education. So people who are graduating and want to become teachers and work with children of all ages.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball.
All right.
So you've written a lot of books. I mean, this is not your first book. It is your baby, but it's not your first book. Joanne, what gives you the inspiration to write? How do you write? Where do you go with your writing? You say, well, I get these
Well, I've been writing since I've been a kid. I mean, my sister used, and I love you, Judy. My sister used to make fun because I was trying to do ads for, like I loved certain foods. And so I'd write something to see if I'd win something, and she'd always make fun of me. So for as long as I remember, writing has been something that's very close to my heart. And when I write, I always feel very guided. I mean, I was thinking of something that I'm going to write, that I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and something that I'm going to be writing over the weekend. So sometimes I'll sit down and the information pours forth, or I do what I call power walking. And when I do that, I get a lot of inner guidance, and I'll write things down, jot things down. And I just think that writing is one of my vehicles for expressing and helping other people.
So we got a question from the audience. This is going to be a doozy.
Another doozy.
Did you have parents of regular kids really tell their fear or disdain for the autistic children in the regular school?
There were many parents of so-called regular kids who were afraid, who were upset that this program was happening in that school. They thought, again, that these kids might be violent, or it would actually bring the educational caliber of education down. And again, when we don't understand what's something that's new, when we don't know and we're faced with it, there are lots of fears and lots of concerns that rise to the surface. And many of these parents, as well as the teachers.
Really?
Yes, there were teachers who, again, I mean, why are these kids here? It's like, you're going to upset the apple cart. Just better to just let us continue the way we are. Right. You know, oftentimes change for all of us could be very, very difficult. And this was a situation where even the community, oftentimes many of these children were with their parents. They weren't out in the mainstream of community life. They didn't go out to eat. They didn't go because the environment was at the time was very non-accepting. It was like, this kid is weird.
You think it's changed?
Well, a few years ago, I was in a diner, and this father had a son who was making all sorts of noises and whatever. And what the father did, which was very interesting because I understood what was going on, what the father did was he actually went to the different people in the different booths, and he said, my son has such and such, and I hope you understand. I don't know if it's changed totally. I think there's more acceptance. I think there's more information about people with special needs, about people with differences, so that we have more of a level of understanding than we did initially. But I still think there's a lot more that we need to do. We need to get to a place, to me, globally, where somebody with differences isn't attacked, whether it's someone with special needs or someone who's a different religious beliefs or other or different color of your skin or whatever it is. We need to be able to be in a place globally whereby we embrace those differences and recognize that that's a beautiful thing. We're a world. And could you imagine how boring it would be if everybody was the same? I mean, to me, that would be no fun. And as you both know, I like to have fun, right, Ellie?
Yes, ma'am. Dorothea, I'll let you ask a question, and then we have another one from the audience.
Yes. Yeah, as you're saying, ignorance is very dangerous. So I'm wondering, why is more heaven important and relative now and today?
Because I think, again, it's a way of seeing into these children and seeing their journey, whether it was the inner journey that I created, but also the journey from not being accepted, from not being able to communicate, from people giving up hope about these children, to seeing at the end where they blossomed, where they were able to connect, where they were able to make friends, where they were able to learn, where they were able to be proud and have self-confidence in themselves. And when we see that, I believe if we see that, we recognize, wow, if we only gave people a chance, if we gave children like the children in More Heaven a chance to learn, to be accepted, to figure out how to communicate, how to reach them, who knows what incredible stuff can happen.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's what's interesting is that many of the teachers that I said before who were against the program and the parents who were against the program were able to see, hey, my children aren't going to be attacked by this kid, just the opposite. And it hasn't affected or and somehow devalued the educational system. It's actually enhanced it. And oftentimes there have been programs recently whereby children with special needs and someone who a so-called regular child get together and connect, and it's a beautiful thing, and we're seeing that happen more often. But we have to recognize the journey, and it's not just my journey, it's the journey of these children and their parents. Think about that. Their parents had to hide these kids because of the environment, and not just the educational environment, but the cultural environment that said, there's something weird about your kid. Keep him away from us. Keep her away from us.
Yeah.
Wow. So someone in the audience is really going to digress, and they want you to tell them about your power walking. They would like to write a book and want to know how that's a way to pursue their thoughts.
Tell them to contact me. Well, I work a lot with intuition, and I teach people how to access their intuitive and their psychic abilities, and work with guides and angels and da 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 da. So when I walk, I get a lot of information because I'm open to it, and I have guides and teachers, and I connect with them, and they connect with me. So it's about, to me, I think it's about being open, and oftentimes when we get inner guidance, people don't pay attention to it. Well, I pay attention to my inner guidance, because one time years ago, I was going to go through a walk, and I couldn't find my keys, and the phone rang, and everything kept deterring me from going on this walk. Well, so eventually it was too late because I had to get to work. So I find out a few hours later that where I was going to walk, there was a whole catastrophe, and there were police, and there was somebody that was actually doing something wrong. And I would have been right in that place if my inner guidance hadn't say, okay, you're not going there today. No way.
Time out.
Right.
So tell me about this Tina Randolph, who's in your book. She's 20-something, compassionate and determined.
That's me.
and she ran into a school environment that was unsympathetic, hostile, and doubtful of the program success of the program, the ability to move and go into that program. Is Tina Randolph a real person that you encountered in your life, or is she one of your fictional characters?
She's based on basically she's based on my life. So basically the book is actually written in a little bit of journal form from the teacher's perspective, and it's really my perspective. It's like, how do I reach these kids? What do I need to do? Can I read like a one paragraph?
No, you can't do it in a paragraph, Joanne. I'm sorry.
No, I know, but can I read?
You can't do anything in a paragraph. Read. You did tell me you have a couple excerpts out of your book you want to read. So
right, because this was when I was really working with these kids. I kept a little bit of a journal, and it helped me kind of work through some challenges that were going on, like try to figure out things about how to connect with these kids. And so Tina is really me. And
okay.
So this is actually the beginning of the book, and the first little girl with autism, her name is Eva. In my hands are records of a little girl I have never met. Psychological data, medical history, and her family background all tell us Eva's story from birth to 7 years. One young life probed with fine-tuned instruments and then split open for dissection by impartial fingers. There is no record of Eva's consent to her life exposed like this. Eva Turner diagnosed as exhibiting autistic behavior. I wonder what she will tell us. Does she remember that she was delivered from her mother's womb with the aid of forceps? Can she recall when paralysis numbed the right side of her face, with 3 months of no feeling in her right cheek in the first year of her life? What nightmarish visions tormented Eva to leave her crying in her sleep for 2 stormy years? Does she remember? I skim over the pages, not able to test for reading, math, or intelligence, lacking social and communication skills, and engaging in self-stimulation, excuse me. I slip the papers back inside the folder and wonder why, if Eva's language was developing normally, she stopped talking at age 2.5. She will officially start tomorrow. The moment her feet step on the pavement, my responsibility as her teacher begins. A language delayed little girl with the body of a 7-year-old and the mental age of a child of 3. Somehow I am to stir her. I hope she'll be receptive and open to me and willing to listen and learn what I have to teach her. I wonder what marks a child with emotional challenges wears on her face to make her more visible or more hidden than the rest of us. And I wonder if her secrets are any more secret than my own. Is her fear imprinted across her eyes to remind us of something we want to forget?
Wow. Just wow.
Thank you. But so to get back to Tina, that's me. And kind of finding my way to how do I get to these kids that nobody wanted? How do I embrace them? And they were beautiful. They taught me, like I said earlier, they taught me a lot. Like, again, it's about, and they knew that they were different. They knew that they were not accepted. They knew that they had to prove themselves in so many different ways. And they did a fantastic job. So I applaud them. I really do.
We applaud you. Dorothea?
You were talking earlier on about guided by intuition, and I'm wondering how you discerned that it was your intuition speaking to you rather than your mind.
Well, I think my intuition is all mixed up in my mind. Somehow and I've been working with intuition for a really, really long time, ever since I've been really young, when I heard voice, just so I got comfortable with it. And basically like I can see things or hear things or get messages, or sometimes a message will appear through a friend or on the whatever, all sorts of ways. And it feels different. I don't know how to explain it, except it's more of a feeling. The brain sometimes makes you think and probe, and this is just like something that comes up that doesn't feel harmful, that feels comforting and beautiful. And I'll tell you a really quick story. I don't know how much time we have, but I'm not paying.
We have 12 minutes left.
Okay, you're paying attention to that, not me. So I told you guys that I had a head injury, and that's a whole other book. And one day I was walking, doing my power walk, and I was in a lot of pain. I hope I don't cry for this one. And I'm walking, and I'm really in a lot of pain, and just feeling like, how am I going to get through this day? How am I going to get through my life? And I hear this voice inside my head. And to me, it sounded like the voice of God. And it said, I got you. It was a male voice. I felt like I was being held. The tears streamed down my face. They weren't sad. It was like I felt I'm going to be okay.
Mhm.
And so I get messages, not necessarily like that, but I get messages a lot that I think it's important to pay attention to. And when you are able to differentiate between the mind and something that you're worried about, as opposed to a message that's guiding you to do something, it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm. I agree.
Wow. Dorothea, do you have something?
You're so multi-talented, and I'm sure what you have to offer speaks to a lot of people in different ways. How can people get in touch with you? How can they connect with you?
So I have a website. I'll give you the short version, docwhite.org. I also have a radio show, Power Your Life. It's on Blog Talk Radio. And you can email me, Joanne, with an E that I've added because it's not on my birth records, but it looks prettier, at drjoannewhite, WHITE.com. I always respond. And I'll even give you a phone number, 856-795-5854. Please connect with me. Also, like I said, I'm working on 2 docuseries and a couple of other books. And the docuseries, like I said to Dorothea and Eleanor and Ellie, I have plans for you.
Oh boy. Did you have another passage you wanted to read?
Let's see. I do.
You have about 5 minutes, and then we'll take 5 to
Okay.
wind up.
Well, you know what? I'm not going to read it. It's okay. I think I just wanted to introduce that little girl, and I think I did that, so that's okay.
And is your book basically medical, educational, inspirational?
It's
Is it all of it?
It's not medical. Excuse me. It's not medical at all. It's actually, to me, I think it's inspirational. It was very guided, like I said. But at the back of the book, there's some information about other kinds of things, but it's important. So I think it's inspirational. I think it opens people's minds and hearts to people with special needs, children with special needs, and being able to have patience, endurance, learn how to accept, how to get into these children's worlds, and how, again, to remember that we are all beautifully different and beautifully alike at the same time, and we need to come together with that and embrace that, because I think when we do, and I keep repeating the same thing, that it's just going to create more opportunities and more possibilities for all of us.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm just I'm just thrilled that we met, and I'm thrilled that Reader's Magnet brought us together, Joanne. This has just been unbelievable. Your life story, your life work, and how you've dedicated yourself predominantly to the children who have been cast aside is tremendous, just tremendous. Dorothea, would you like to add a few things before we wrap her up here?
Yes, I am actually very grateful about having had this opportunity to talk to Joanne, because it just is another synchronicity, sort of an unexpected and very helpful event that confirms that we're divinely guided if we pay attention. So for me, it's a great gift, and it's been a real pleasure listening to the contributions and an inspiration. So I'll carry on inspiring myself and others.
Thank you. And yes, I think we're divinely guided. I do want to read one thing real fast.
All right.
Okay. And this basically, it was around Christmas time, and I told you that one of the characters, Martin, had all these imaginary characters with him that he felt comfortable enough to bring into the class. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house the only creature stirring was Martin Mouse. hanging up his Santa traps of fishnets and rope, and watching for Santa to slide down the slope. He will capture mighty Santa and bring him to his knees, whisk him to planet Zagoot in less time than a sneeze. Zagoutians will line up in unearthly delight, and as Santa gives out presents, there's never a fight. Zagoutians are trained, indeed taught to live well by their king's noble edict, more heaven than hell.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to, Joanne, I'm going to give you you got 2 to 3 minutes to do some closing remarks.
Okay. Well, I think I've been redundant about that we need to accept one another, and along this journey, I've met so many brilliant people, because again, from one of my docuseries, it is about people with special needs and different, and mostly adults and different programs. And I've been wowed and awed by some of the amazing adults, not children anymore, some of the amazing adults who've had to go through so much adversity and hardship to get to a place of where they are today. And one gentleman had dyslexia and other kinds of things, and he is a beautiful writer, and someone else who actually is an adult son of one of my former clients. He was able, when her computer broke, he just created a whole new computer for her. He was able to put things together, not because he read instructions, but because he just knew how to do things that, hey, I have to read instructions, and sometimes I can't even understand the instructions.
Right.
So we underestimate, and we underestimate many people. We also underestimate ourselves. And one of the reasons that I call it my power walk, and I have my show called Power Your Life, is that we need to be able to take steps along our journey to feel empowered, to embrace our own specialness, our own greatness. And that's not about ego. Forget about ego. It's about, we're here to share. We're here to serve. We're here to love one another as well as ourselves. And when we tap into the riches that we all have and are able to bring them out to share with other people, it's beautiful. And we create this incredible symphony of gifts, and that to me can make us so incredibly rich.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Dorothea, would you like to say a couple words, and then, because we're down to 2 minutes, would you like to say a couple words, and then I will close us out?
The word empower keeps coming up, and that's one thing that's very important for me, to make people aware how many gifts they have and talents they have, and what they can achieve if they honor that. And once they get in touch with that, they feel empowered.
You're so right. Again, we have to be able to honor that. First, recognize that we have them, figure out how to bring them out, honor it, and again, most importantly, be able to share them.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
I would like to say just a few things. First of all, I'd like to thank ReadersMagnet for sponsoring and bringing the Festival of Storytellers to the world, because there are now almost 9,000 people who are following this event, and it's just a wonderful thing for authors. It's a wonderful thing for listeners to spend an hour with someone who's as inspirational and who is as full of accolades as the two of you are. And I'm just grateful for that. I'd like to invite our listeners to visit the booths. We each have a booth. Joanne's booth is More Heaven. Dorothea's booth is When Life Has Other Plans, Discover Hidden Gifts. And my booth is Generations of Good Food. And I'd like to invite everyone to join us. And I especially, again, want to thank ReadersMagnet for the opportunities that they have given to the authors who are participating in this event. And with that, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Readers
Okay.
Magnet. Thank you, Dorothea. Thank you, Ellie. Mwah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, audience.
Goodbye
Yes.
and stay safe, stay well. Bye for now.
And
See you
stay
next time.
brilliant.
Okay.